back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Board Game Captain.
I'm Lynn.
I'm Juliana.
And we're doing another episode of things that we think are killing the game industry. And this one was Juliana's idea. If you watched our last episode, you would have seen a bit where Juliana threw out a counterpoint that was so interesting that we decided to immediately film a second episode. So Juliana, why don't you introduce your idea?
Yeah, so I brought up the fact that elitism is probably keeping out new gamers from the gaming community. And I think that we all have some really interesting points on this, different views, but I think we all kind of agree that, you know, the people who are like, oh, you're new, you know,
You only like light games.
Yeah. You only like light games or party games. Like, everybody starts somewhere.
And you know what? And I'm just going to throw this out there, that we all, and when I say we all, everyone here, and probably most of you watching, have been guilty of this at one time or another. We all get elitist. We all get like, oh, you know, we invited someone to game night and they brought Monopoly with them. The horror. You know, we all get that way. We all get elitist at least a little bit once in a while. It happens to us. I think it's kind of part of human nature. But it definitely is damaging to a subculture like gaming. When you want it to survive and you want it to do well and you want new people to come in, and if you're being elitist to everybody and excluding them, then you're not going to grow the hobby.
Well, I feel like out of the three of us, I'm probably the most guilty of it, honestly. Like, I brought it up as a topic, but, like, I am...
No, but, you know, that's great, and that's very self-aware.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's one of those things like, oh, you know, I play board games. Like, oh, what do you play? Like, I have a collection of Monopoly. It's like, okay, like...
This is literally a story you told us earlier today.
It's a story that I told you earlier today, yeah.
But also, like, who needs more than one Monopoly?
Who needs more than one? They're all the same.
Well, it's kind of that I think it's less about gaming and more about the whole Americana aspect of Monopoly and how it's a big part of American history kind of thing.
The other issue that I think comes up a lot with gaming for me is, like, if I ask someone that I'm just meeting and I'm like, oh, like, I play board games, like, do you play anything? And, like, I say that with the, like, intention of bringing a board game to play with them, right? And they'll say, like, oh, like, I really want to, but, like, I never get the chance. And it's like, well, I don't understand how you don't suggest it if you want to do it. I don't think that's, like, elitism necessarily, because I think it's just, like, people...
Well, I think at that point the elitism would be if that stopped you from then trying to introduce them to the games. Like, if they said that,
sure,
and then you were like, oh, you're not a real gamer, I'm not going to play a game with you, then it would be elitism. Sure. But, like, if they said that and you were like, well, let me introduce you to some of my favorite games, then that's not elitism. That's fine. Because then you're still introducing a new gamer to game.
Well, but I'm saying I get elitist when they're like, oh, I just never get a chance because, like, none of my friends like to play. It's like, well, are you a sheep? Like, are you a lemming? Do you just do whatever your friends want to do? Like, just, like, grab a board game. Like, it's not that difficult. They're everywhere. They're
That's
at Target, you know? And... you know, people would rather sit on their phones than sit down for a game. So,
all right. So, what are some other instances of elitism? You were talking about one before we were discussing our purposes.
Yeah, I mentioned gatekeeping, where
So, explain gatekeeping for people who don't know the term.
It's where a person newer to gaming may have played some games, but, like, you know, it's later games
or classics,
or it's classic games, and then someone who's, you know, deep into the hobby already just kind of turns them. What?
I explained to her for the gatekeeper. Just teasing. I'm sorry.
Turns them off by just kind of, instead of being you know, saying, like, oh, you like Monopoly? Well, why don't you try Lords of Vegas? Instead of doing something like that, they just make fun of them for liking Monopoly, or, you know, things like that, where they kind of make them not want to look at other games.
Yeah, and
because they feel unwelcome.
But Monopoly is, I mean, we always use Monopoly as an example, but the thing is that...
it's a good example,
if you like Monopoly... who likes Monopoly?
Well, here's what it comes down to. Monopoly is the good example because Monopoly is a good example because it is a game that when you tell someone you play games, one, they're very likely to think of, because when we're not talking about modern games, just classic games that everyone knows. Everyone knows Monopoly. Mm-hmm. And if they don't know how much better modern games have gotten, it's a game they're likely to bring up when you say, oh, I'm into board games, and they go, oh, you mean like Monopoly? And then everyone's had that, every gamer has had that scenario happen, and they go, no, not like Monopoly.
Well, I would feel better even if someone was like, oh, board games like checkers, because checkers is timeless.
True.
Right?
Okay. Yeah, I could see that.
So it's in chess and dominoes. Oh, I love dominoes. Like, you know, I grew up playing dominoes.
Yeah, Monopoly is feeling very dated at this point. It's not timeless at all. But those others ones, yeah, I agree with you. If somebody said like chess, I'd be like, oh yeah, I play games that are like chess.
Yeah,
sure.
and it's like so much easier to introduce them into other games because Monopoly has so many. I mean, it's just a bad game. And it's just, you know, Lords of Vegas is one of the games that you could maybe get someone into, but it's harder to like connect the dots, I think.
So I think there's this feeling, this underlying feeling amongst gamers that's a similar feeling to the gatekeeper culture around geek culture in general, where for those of us who are you know middle age or approaching middle age, around that kind of age, we all remember back when we were kids when this sort of geek culture stuff was very much made fun of and ridiculed, and you had to not tell people about it. And you know, now it's becoming more mainstream. The biggest grossing movies are comic book movies. The Dungeons and Dragons has movie stars coming out and talking about how they play it. And it's become more of a mainstream thing. And I think there's a bit of a like counterculture rejection to mainstream people getting into the stuff that we have known about and loved for forever. Sure. Now, when they used to make fun of us for it, wanting to now be like, oh, can you show me how to play Dungeons and Dragons? And people are like, yeah, no, it's not the game for you.
Well, and actually, like, bringing up that example is really good. So I grew up playing board games, but, I mean, I did play all the normal ones, and then I grew into, you know, around, like, 2012 is when I started really getting into board games, modern board games. But D&D is still something that I haven't played a lot of, and every time I've gone to play, like, at a store or, you know, just a group of people that I don't know at a con, I have not been received very well because I don't know all the rules.
And again, that's the gatekeeping.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying, like, it's really funny that I'm such a bad person who gatekeeps when people do that to me for D&D.
Well, you just have to realize that you're doing what other people do to you that you don't like, and then, you know, try to better yourself and try not to do that.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm better at it now. Like, I'm much better about it now, but, I mean, definitely guilty of it. So definitely making fun of people after, I think, is bad. But I still do.
So one of the things. So first off, in regard to that gatekeeping in general, I think if someone is showing an interest, an honest interest, and they're wanting to learn about games that you enjoy, teach them to play the game. Just, you know, and if someone shows an interest to show up to game night, but they show up with classic games, just be like, you know, you don't have to be condescending. You can say, thanks for bringing some games. We're going to play some of ours tonight. These are not really the sort of games we play in the group, but thank you for the thought. Let me introduce you to some newer things.
Yeah, or you can just say, like, you know, you can pick one of the classic games they chose and try and find something that's similar but better.
Like your example of Lords of Vegas.
Yeah, no, that's a really good... And
or also, Mysterium for Clue.
Oh my gosh, but I mean, I still like Clue, I'm not going to lie. I think Clue's kind of fun.
Yeah, so...
Mysterium is like my favorite game. So.
Yeah. So anyway, one more example I wanted to throw out, because we were joking around about this a little bit while we were discussing what we discussed a little bit ahead of time about what kind of things we would discuss, without going into too much detail, so that we could still be surprised while filming. And one of the things I talked about is my concept that I have dubbed the Grog Nerds and their self-fulfilling prophecy. So now this is a microcosm, and I'm going to explain what this means, by the way, in a moment. But this is a microcosm of the gatekeeping. It's a very, very specific and heightened version of said gatekeeping, and really illustrates why it's a bad thing and why it's detrimental to the game industry. So if you love your games and you want them to survive and you want them to do well and you want them to have new additions and expansions and other games based on them that come out and sequels and all these things, you want them to sell well, because if they don't sell well, the companies won't keep making them. That's the bottom line. So you want more people to get into them. And so now, here's what it is. A Grog Nerd, if you're not familiar, Grog Nerd comes from a French term which means old soldier. And in the game industry, it generally refers to these older gamers who are very, very set in their ways and have a very specific and narrow view of what a real game is. And it's usually for them, for most what we would refer to as a stereotypical Grog Nerd, they're usually really, really into the old school, super heavy war strategy games. A very perfect example of that, if you're not familiar, might be the game Advanced Squad Leader, which you can look up. It's a military game with a big hex map and lots of cardboard chits. And there's a lot of other games that are like that and are very similar to that. And usually the Grog Nerds will look down on more modern games. They might be like, your game uses miniatures. You know, and like little things like that would totally make them discounted as a proper war game. Or your game isn't about war. You know, and
that's not a real game.
That's not a real, exactly. Mm-hmm. And they look down their nose. But here's the thing: if you ever eavesdrop in on a group of grognards playing at your local game store, and you'll know them when you see them, but if you ever eavesdrop in, you will often hear them lament about how those newer, younger gamers don't like proper games, and how because of it, their games, the games that they love, are going to die out one day, and how sad that is. But if you walk up to those same people and you say, oh, hey, Advanced Squad Leader, I've heard that this is a really amazing simulation of warfare. Could you teach me to play? They will turn, and of course this is not everybody, this is just, again, the generalization, but the grognards, people who fit this grognard theme, will turn and look at you and they will say, oh, it's not your sort of game. You wouldn't like it. And they'll refuse to teach you. And that's what I mean when I say this is the grognard self-fulfilling prophecy, because they're very sad that their games are going to die out, but then they won't spread them. They're not teaching it. Yeah. So of course no one else is going to play it, because no one else can learn from the only people who are currently playing it. And that's why, like, when you go to big game conventions, the kind of companies that make grognard games, year after year, there's less and less of them there. And some of them, to evolve, will move on to making non-grognard sorts of games because they realize the market's just not there anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a microcosm of how gatekeeping is for the entirety of gaming culture. I mean, it's a very more specific and heightened version of that, because they'll even exclude other gamers.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So any other thoughts on this topic?
I don't have any.
No.
Oh, okay. So I guess I got the final thought on that one. Mm-hmm. So that was Juliana's. Sorry, I monopolized the back end of that.
That's okay.
Because that was your topic.
Monopoly kind of monopolizes.
Oh, that's okay. Just put the Monopoly aside and be like, you know what? And you can tell people this. You can say, you know what? I used to like Monopoly a lot too, but I found this new game that I like better. That is very like Monopoly, and you then pull out Lords of Vegas,
and it doesn't cause you to flip the table.
No, it definitely doesn't. It's Lords of Vegas is definitely the replacement to Monopoly. There's other games that are like that too. Any games with a proper economy, but modern game aesthetics.
Well, I think it's the whole roll and move games that like Chutes and Ladders and Candyland and Monopoly.
Those just play themselves. You know, I have actually seen some games more recently where rolling and moving is a part of that work better. Actually, I'm beginning to believe that you can do roll and move in certain ways. For instance, if you roll multiple dice and then you get to pick which one is for the move, or in some cases when you do a press your luck rolling and then to move, it can still be done properly in games with otherwise modern designs and actually be all right. It's just the way those are, where you literally just roll the dice and that's how far you move. No choice whatsoever. No pick one of the dice. No re-roll the dice and press your luck until you stop. That people feel like they have no decision.
Sure.
So that is definitely a problem.
Yeah.
But we're getting off topic.
Yeah.
So the topic is that we discussed in this video. The topic was why elitism is killing the game industry. So I think we've covered it pretty well. Mm-hmm. So if you're watching this, try to be a little self-aware like we're being, and realize in the times that you do this, because we've done this. Juliana was very forthcoming about times she's done this. I know I've done this. I later think about it and I was like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? And I try not to. I do. You have to realize this, and you have to realize that you need to not be that person who is being elitist and driving people away from joining the hobby. Instead, be welcoming. Get them to join the hobby. Get them to expand your hobby so that your hobby will be ever growing and ever greater every year after year. That's what you got to be. So there you have it. You have any questions, comments, or concerns either on this video or specifically on stories you want to tell about gatekeeping, feel free to share them in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see us do more like it, be sure to give it a like, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain and hit that little bell icon on my channel so you get alerts every time I upload a new video. And by the way, that's Kaptain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.